Again, it's a Redskin.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to talk about the top 5 programming languages to learn in the year 2021. Or actually, this is just a catchy title for getting more clicks. We should call it top 5 programming languages to learn at the moment, at least. Because a lot of you guys ask me, which language should I learn? Should I learn Python? Should I learn Java? Should I learn C++, C#, whatever, PHP? Or what should I learn? And of course, the answer is not that simple. So the ranking is not to be taken as number 1 is the best language, no matter what you want to do, and number 5 is the 5th best or the 5th best language, no matter what you want to do. I'm going to mention why I think that you should learn the individual languages, and maybe for some of you, the number 1 is not going to be a language that you should learn. Not everybody needs to learn the language on number 1. Not everybody needs to learn the language on number 2. Depends on what you're going to do, what you want to do, and we're going to talk about my personal opinion on the top 5 languages that you should learn in the year 2021 or just at the moment right now for the future. So let us get right into it. So for place number 5, I chose C# and Java. Yes, I chose 2 languages because even though they have differences and they're quite different in terms of ecosystem and infrastructure and so on, those are the 2 leading enterprise languages. So if you want to get a job in a company that has a large system that needs to be programmed, enterprise applications, big back-end web applications with databases where you need to have some huge software, and you need to, or you have a large code base in general, you should be learning C# and Java. So if your goal is to just get into programming and get a job, you want to get a job at a big corporation, you want to get a programming or software development job, C# and Java are the best languages for that. And I say this as someone who is really not a Java fan. A lot of people in the comments ask me, are you going to teach Java? And I don't want to. I don't say I'm not going to do it no matter what, but I'm not a big fan of Java personally. I don't like to use it. I use it mostly because of my university, so I'm not a big Java fan, but it would be ignorant to say Java is useless. No, Java is still one of the most popular languages that we have nowadays, and it's in every ranking where you look at, jobs or how much it's used in companies. Java is always at least in the top 5. Most of the time it's in the top 3, and for a long time it was on place number 1 in a lot of different rankings. Now C# is the alternative for those who don't like Java and don't mind being limited, not really limited, but more focused on Microsoft, because C#, even though Microsoft makes some changes with the .NET Core movement and so on, it's still, if you're a C# programmer, you're going to be working in a Microsoft ecosystem. You're going to use the Azure Cloud, the .NET framework, you're going to use Visual Studio, you're going to use Windows Server, and so on, if you want to really use the .NET framework. So I would say it's a matter of taste here. So if you like Java more, it's platform independent. It's, part of it is open source, depends on what you're using exactly. But both languages are quite similar. I think C# is a little bit more powerful when it comes to performance, but to be honest, I'm not that skilled in C# or Java. I think I'm quite good at Java, but I'm not really using it, so I don't like to say I'm good at Java because people assume that I'm a Java programmer then. But the fact is that if you want to get a job, if you want to be, if you want to have the skills that are needed in a job market, C# and Java are always good choices. You're always going to get a good software engineering, software development job if you know C# or Java. So those are the languages that I would put on place number 5, especially for those who want to get a job. Also, one more reason to learn Java or C# is if you're starting to program and you don't know where you're going to, in what direction you're going to go, I recommend learning Java or C#. Why? Because they're not as low level and difficult as C or C++. And they're also not as high level as Python, for example. In Python, everything's done for you. In C, C++, nothing's done for you. And in Java, C#, you have like, like the average. It's like medium. It's not as simple as Python, but it's not going to freak you out in the same way that C or C++ are going to freak you out. So they're more beginner friendly. And I think that it's not necessarily the best way to start with Python, for example, because Python makes everything too easy and you don't learn about a lot of things that you should be learning about. So everyone who goes into programming and just wants a starting language, and this person doesn't know, okay, I want to go into machine learning, I want to go into game development, you don't know where you want to go yet, I would recommend starting with Java or C#, and it depends on taste. Java is more for the Linux users probably, or for cross-platform users, and C# is for Microsoft-focused people. One more thing that I should mention is that C# is also a great language for game development. A lot of games like, I think also Among Us is coded in C# in the Unity engine with a mix of C++, I think. Terraria is also coded in C# in the XNA framework, I think. So game development, C# is a very good language for that. And Java is also interesting for Android development, even though it's more and more replaced by Kotlin. So in place number 4, we have C and C++, and those two languages are not the same. I know it, and I always say that. Don't treat them as one language. They're different. If you know C, you don't know C++ at all, because C is procedural. It's a very simple, compact language that is just one abstraction layer above assembly, and C++ is an object-oriented language with a lot to learn there. So they're not the same language, but I listed them here on place number 4 together because the reasons to learn those two languages are quite similar. And the first reason I want to talk about is that they make you a better programmer. Learning C, learning C++ forces you to deal with lower level concepts. You need to allocate the memory manually and dynamically. You need to free it. You need to take care of the space allocated. You need to take care of buffer overflow attacks. You need to even generating random numbers in C is a challenge, because you cannot just go ahead and say random number from 0 to 1,000 like you can do it in Python or even in Java. You have to specify the seed. You have to think about how to randomize that seed. You need to say, okay, take the process ID, take a control variable, take an algorithm, and generate random numbers. You cannot just say generate a couple of random numbers. You need to take care of everything that happens on a lower level, and C doesn't help you with that. Also, it's a very difficult language. Both of them are very difficult languages. And this is one reason that you should learn both of them, or one of them, because they're so difficult and they operate on a lower level. And if you want to go a little bit extra, you can also learn assembly, because that makes you then a very good programmer. But of course, this is not the only reason why I listed C and C++ at place number 4. Another reason would be the performance. Whenever you need high performance, or you're limited by the hardware, you have very limited memory, very limited CPU power, and so on, you need to take care of how much resources you're allocating and wasting, and you need to optimize your code to use it in the most optimal way. And C is even better for that than C++, but both languages are very, very fast, because they don't have stuff like garbage collection. They don't have all these systems that make programming easier but slow down the execution. So whenever you need high performance, you're going to need to do it in C++, C, or sometimes even assembly. For example, in finance, what's oftentimes done is you prototype them all in Python, you test it in Python, and once you know it's good, you go ahead and implement it in C or even in assembly, because you cannot afford to lose milliseconds. You need to do it as fast as possible, because you don't want to waste time on garbage collection or stuff like that. You do it manually, you do it exactly as you stated it, and assembly is the best for it, but maybe it's a little bit too complicated for some tasks, so you're going to use C or C++ for that. And this is one reason to learn them as well. Also, you're going to definitely get jobs with C, C++, because everything's based on C, C++. Python is based on C, C++. Java is based on C, C++. I mean, C++ is based on C, obviously, so everything's based on C. Linux is based on C. I'm not sure if Windows is based on C, C++ as well, but I think yes. I don't want to say something that's wrong, but I think yes, this operating system is also based on C, C++. Games, obviously, if you're into gaming and you don't want to use C#, with the Unreal Engine, you're going to use C++. With different engines, you're going to use C++. So those languages are everywhere, and they're not going to be replaced easily. Even though other competitors like Rust come along, they're not just going to make all the systems that are running on C or C++, they're not going to vanish because of that. You still need people who are going to code in C, C++ to maintain and extend the system. So those languages are not dying anywhere soon. In fact, C is one of the most popular programming languages according to the TIOBE index, I think. Either rank 1 or 2 or 3 or something like that. So it's very, very popular, even though it's very old. And this is also one reason to learn at least C programming. And other reasons are, of course, if you're going into machine learning, TensorFlow, for example, is written in C++. You use Python for machine learning because you're just specifying, okay, I want to have a layer here, I want to have this here, and use NumPy here, and use Pandas here, and use TensorFlow, PyTorch here. But the actual stuff that is NumPy, that is Python, that is TensorFlow, is written in C++ because you cannot afford training a neural network with Python. Python is very slow, it's very high level and simple, but if you want to do something as fast as possible, you're not going to use Python. And of course, one last thing I want to mention here, because a lot of you guys are into cybersecurity and ethical hacking. If you're into hacking, there's no way around C. You need to know C, you need to master C, and you need to master assembly to be a good hacker. You need to understand buffer overflow attacks and all the different low-level attacks, bytecode injection, and so on. You need to deal with assembly and C to be a good quote-unquote hacker. So in place number 3, we have JavaScript, and this is definitely not a personal preference because I'm not a fan of JavaScript, but it would be ignorant to not include it on this list because nowadays you cannot be a programmer without knowing some sort of JavaScript, some level of JavaScript. Again, I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not part of that JS world. I'm not coding a lot in JavaScript, but if I have to, I can code in JavaScript, and this is what you should also be doing. You should be able to code in JavaScript. I'm not saying go ahead and use JavaScript frameworks all the time for whatever you're doing. I'm also more a fan of Django and of different frameworks for the backend, but you should know your way around Node.js. You should know libraries like React. You should also know JavaScript in the front end. You should be able to work with jQuery. You should be able to work with Angular and so on. Just some basic stuff so that you're not completely overwhelmed when you have to encounter JavaScript somewhere, because it's used in web development. If you're doing anything web related at all, you should be comfortable with JavaScript. I'm not saying, again, that this should be your main language or anything like that, but you should just know JavaScript. You should not be one of those programmers who know Python and C and C++ maybe and Java and has no clue about JavaScript. It's not that complicated. Just look into it and make it part of your programming language arsenal, because I think nowadays, even though I don't like it, I really don't like the way JavaScript works, you should be learning it and you should know it. I'm not saying choose it, just learn it. And there are a lot of good frameworks out there that make JavaScript programming very interesting. And I think this language is not going to disappear in the future. And maybe you would add TypeScript here as well if you're into JavaScript and you like it. Also learn TypeScript and become a better web developer. So in place number 2, we have Go or Golang, and this programming language is very fascinating to me. I'm not as deep into it as I would like to be, and I'm going to learn a lot about it in 2021. Maybe I'm going to do some videos on it as well, but this language is very interesting. First of all, it's backed by Google, and it's also statically typed, compiled, and syntactically similar to C, but it also has memory safety and garbage collection. And it's also way simpler than C or C++, for example, and it's optimized for concurrency. And I don't think that there is any other language, at least not a big language, that's optimized for concurrency the way Go is optimized for concurrency. And this language is very interesting because it combines to some degree the simplicity of Python with the performance of a language like C. Not exactly, it's not as simple as Python, it's not as fast as C. There are still some use cases where you cannot use Go because it has garbage collection. But still, it's a very good, I don't know, what would you say, combination of the simplicity of Python and the performance of a language like C. And what's very fascinating to me is how much popularity this language gained over the past couple of years. So here you can see the GitHub language stats based on pull requests, and you can see Go is number 4 after JavaScript, Python, and Java. And you can see it started here and it's going up, and now it's already place number 4 based on pull requests. It's very, very popular. A lot of companies are using it, and on the Stack Overflow developer survey, you can also see that Go is somewhat popular, but you can see if you go to most loved, dreaded, and wanted, you can see that the most wanted technologies Go is at place number 3, which means that this is the percentage of developers who are not developing with the language or technology, but have expressed interest in developing with it, which means that a lot of people want to learn Python and JavaScript because they're not using it yet, which is understandable. But there are a lot of people who want to learn Go, and this is very fascinating to me. This is place number 3 here. And if you look at the PyPL popularity of programming language index here, you can see that Go has a upward tendency that is also very fascinating here. So Go is definitely a language that you want to look into. Maybe not as your first language, maybe not as your main language yet, but it definitely solves problem, or it definitely makes working with large code bases easier and more practical than Python, for example. And it's also more simple and easier to use than C. So you should definitely have a look at Golang. And I don't think that place number 1 is going to surprise anyone here. It's Python. And before we get into the praise of Python, let me add some words of caution here, because everyone is hyping Python and we know Python is great and Python is simple and you can do everything in Python. It's so simple, it's so great, it's so easy. But you should not call yourself a programmer if you only know Python. Don't be one of those Python script kiddies who know Python, who know how to use 1 or 2 libraries or even 20 libraries and then say they're great at programming. Because if you only know Python and you're constantly using some libraries that someone else has written, you can build interesting stuff, but you're not a real programmer, at least in my eyes, because you should combine Python with a lower level statically typed language like C, C++, or at least something like Java and C#. You should not only learn Python and maybe JavaScript and call yourself a master developer. If you only know Python, this is a good start. You can start with Python. Python is a great language for starting. It's very beginner friendly, but it's interpreted, it's high level, and it's dynamically typed. You cannot use it for a lot of different things. You cannot develop games with it. You cannot expect a very high performance with it, at least if you're not using C, C++ code in the background. You cannot use it for embedded systems the way you can use C for embedded systems. It's just also because of the dynamical typing, you cannot use it for very, very large code bases. Also, it's interpreted, you cannot compile it, you cannot, it's just not perfect for everything. And I just want to mention this here because everyone loves Python. They're going to see Python at place number 1, and they're going to think that Python is the perfect language and they only need to learn Python and that's it. If you know Python already, learn one of the other languages. If you don't know Python, definitely learn Python. This language is awesome. You can do almost everything with it. It's simple, it's easy, it's great. It's a very, very good language, especially if you're into machine learning, into finance, into data science, into networking, into scripting, into ethical hacking as well. You need to know how to write good Python scripts. You should definitely learn Python. It's a general purpose language. You can use it in the back end, like Pinterest uses it for, I think they use Django or Flask. I think Django. You can use Flask and Django for web development. Python is a great language. Just don't think that you can do everything with it. If you're going into game development, don't choose Python. If you're going into low-level programming, use Python as a supplement, but don't use it as the main language. But if you're going to machine learning, what we're doing on this channel, if you're going also into ethical hacking to some degree, you should definitely learn Python and combine it with C. And if you're doing anything or you don't know where to start, you can either learn Java, C# as a first language, or Python is also a very, very good language for beginners. And I would definitely recommend learning Python no matter what you're doing in programming. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting a like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. Now, for those of you who are still confused because you still don't know where to start, you still don't know what to do, just learn Python, okay? If you already know Python, learn C++. That's the easy answer. I have Python tutorials. I have C++ tutorials here. Those are currently my two favorite languages. Maybe this will change when I learn more about Go. Of course, if you have questions, leave them in the comments down below. I'm going to answer them if I know the answer, obviously. And keep in mind that this list, even though I try to do it objectively by looking at data, looking at job offers and so on, it's still partly subjective and it's my opinion. Maybe you're going to say Python sucks. Maybe you're going to say no one needs to learn Go because it's not going to be a language of the future. It's my opinion and my estimate of the current situation. It may be wrong. You don't have to agree with it. But I think that this list is a good orientation for beginners. about which programming language to learn. So if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you don't want to miss a single future video. So other than that, thank you very much for watching. See you in the next video and bye.